They're literally out of that line, looking at the ocean
I've
all around you.
heard
Well, there's a
that
lot of tree roots.
she was supposed to be talking to
Yeah, so check
the
that
HR
out.
staff to
That's
see
really
how
nice.
direction they wanted to go.
Is it based off the middle trail?
Okay, all right.
Yeah, I'll check with her tomorrow on that.
I have no emails.
I just off at the couches.
Yeah, and I haven't found that at any of these.
Okay, ready?
Yeah, and the only reason I'm being cautious about the other ones is just because you
Okay, everybody, let's start up again. Thank you all for coming, and thanks especially to our 3 budget members who gave up another sunny afternoon to come here. Even in short sleeves, huh, Ken?
Yes, beautiful day out.
Okay. So we have some couple of things that you don't know about yet we're gonna deal with here. One of them is like 2 hours old. And the other one is maybe a little few days old, but we're gonna talk about that. So don't see Commissioner Bell. Is she on her way, or do we know anything about her? Oh, no. So I'll give you an update as we go down through, but let me first, I'll pass it over to Commissioner Scar. Did you have any opening remarks you'd like to tell the group?
I did not have anything prepared. Is there any
Go
particular
ahead.
you would like me to tell the group?
Well, I've seen you extemporaneously and heard you, and you're pretty good, so. Well, okay, and that,
Okay, well then I'll say something, because now you put me on the spot to be extemporaneous, right? So just to say that we're excited about the work that we've been doing with the strategic plan. I think most of the folks in the room are familiar with that and know that where we're headed, and that this is such a key piece of that work. That this budget work is right at the heart of everything we're doing. So I just appreciate everybody's participation, appreciate the tough questions, appreciate everybody being willing to put it on the table and figure out where we are and how we get where we wanna be. So just a big thank you to everyone.
all right, thank you. So we'll go quickly through some of these, like the mandated services. I'm not gonna go through every department. I'll just ask again another time. A month ago, we'd asked you, or 2 months ago, actually, to look at the services that you deliver that are not mandated by the state of Oregon or the feds or some other authority. And there were some that we talked about, maybe the most significant of which was the police sheriff's office, for example. They don't have to have patrols, but they have to have a number of other services, and so we talked about that. So I'll just quickly ask, has any department come up with another service that you provide that you don't have to by law? I guess not, so
Nick
we'll.
has one.
Nick, I mean, right in front of me.
So to be technical, you don't have to provide veteran services by law. You'd be leaving a lot of ODVA money on the table, which is about $100K annually. It costs us about $500K annually to operate, but we bring in about $24 million in VA comp and pen and VA healthcare benefits. So it's a pretty good
Sure.
ROI. It's about a 48 times
Yeah,
ROI.
well, not only that, but you have your own funding source. You have a 7 cents per thousand levy that you've renewed at that level, right?
Yeah, and it's up in 2027.
Yeah, so I'm not sure that they're much of a candidate for anything other than what we're talking about. They're essentially self-sufficient. They've got their own source of funding, and if anybody in this room wants to touch a veteran, I can ask you to think twice. Okay, yes, Sarah.
All of our services and divisions are mandated by state or local laws, except for the housing division, which is a special revenue fund and is
So
self-sustaining.
no issue there. So I don't think there's much we're doing that we don't have to. There are maybe some minor things that we can pick up as we move forward, like some of the marriage licenses, or well, maybe we have to do that, passports, some of those things that we do, but are rather negligible in the bigger picture. So let's go on down now. Commissioner Bell just showed up, and so I started by asking Mr. Scar if she had any remarks on what we're doing. I'll ask you the same thing.
Well, thank you. I don't have anything special today. I'm glad to be continuing this work and pleased to be here with all of you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so now let's go to the target numbers, and here will be the surprise of the day. If you remember back, several months ago, we prepared this spreadsheet. It had some nice colors on it. And we came up based on what our treasurer's office had done, a target for this year. And then for next year, which starts in a matter of several months, and then stretching it out 2 more years. And the target being the ending cash balance being the beginning cash balance of the next fiscal year. And this year was relatively nominal, about $411,000 that we needed to generate in order to stay whole. We're already in balance, but in order to meet our ending cash balance, which is a beginning cash balance next year of $10 million. And then rolling that forward, there's a much larger number that we need to consider as well. But here's what's happened as recently as the last couple of days. The 411,000 is a product of the treasurer's office, and it had to do with what we can count on. It had to do with what normally happens over the course of a year, some attrition and some filling of vacancies over some period of time that was factored in, as was the labor contracts that provide for certain increases and changes. And so we came up with a number that was just over 400,000. And I had assumed, along I think with many others who've looked at this, that was very, very doable. We didn't have much of a problem this year. Our efforts needed to happen over the next month or two for next year. But that changed today. And here's what changed. And they can tell you that number went up by about another $400,000 based on a report that came in from the Department of Forestry, the State Department of Forestry. We're now expected to get considerably less money this fiscal period than what we had budgeted and planned on. And then they also made some fairly minor adjustments to the personnel or the open positions that could be filled and that are open now but may or may not be filled. So they made some straightforward adjustments, and passing around a summary of that. And I guess I'll ask our treasurer and the deputy treasurer to talk about that as soon as they get passed around, so you have something to look at. It's well, let's see, I'm trying to think of a good metaphor to describe it without getting kicked out of the courthouse. I'll just say it came as a surprise. It's not insurmountable, but it's something nobody saw coming to this extent. And I'll let the treasurers endeavor speak for themselves. And then I'll give you an editorial comment, and then we can talk about it, because before we get into next year, we now have a pretty serious issue before us. And what I thought was fairly straightforward way forward now has become a much bigger rock in the middle of the road. So you want to go first, Sean?
So I'll start. ODF has started to quarterly now send out their projections of what they think we're gonna receive in the quarter. So I have started to update the spreadsheet I used in April, May, when I get their first projection, and it's put out for budget, not only to us, but to the other taxing districts that receive timber revenue. The one on top is what I used for our budget. Obviously, they came in pretty well, 4.6 million, we budget 4.5. In July of this year, when I got their second projection, these are their projections. We actually had one quarter of actual that I could use, which actually came in under than what we thought it was going to for the first quarter of this fiscal year. But their projection now said we were gonna get 4.9 million. Fast forward to last Friday, when I get their October projection, I still only have one quarter. We don't get the last quarter until the end of the month, and now it's showing we're getting 4.1 million projected from them, projections from them that we are to receive, which is $400,000 less than what we budgeted.
And that's the county, that's not countywide. And keep in mind, the number for countywide is more like 16 million, but that's all the other taxing districts. So for Tillamook County, it has gone from what we thought was going to be 4.9 million to 4.
It went from 4.6 to 4.9 to 4.1, based on ODF projections in one quarter of actuals so far this year.
And to put that in perspective, ODF has historically been astronomically high on their projections. So that they went this far low is a shocker to us.
And we did have a really nice graph that showed their
How high their
projections versus what we've gotten, and we can't find it. If we find it, we'll send it out, but it was in the March 27th meeting, which I believe was recorded.
Is there any possibility it will come in the next? Don't know.
We don't know.
They're very difficult to work with and they give you a projection and then you get what you get. I pushed very hard on District Forester Skinner to try to get a better projection, to try to get them to ground it in greater reality and have not been successful.
They used to be a little closer in projection when Kate Skinner was doing them, but now she's not doing them.
They come out of Salem.
So now we're talking about a $900,000 tax?
Well, I think if you net it all out, and I spent a little time this morning with them, if you take the new projection and assume that it's accurate, and I don't know how you make an assumption that's otherwise, because this is directly from the Department of Forestry and their financial people, and they factor in what the market is doing, they factor in how many contracts are in place, how many will be coming on, they think, how many timber sales they're gonna have. So it's an educated guess, and as you heard, it's historically been a little on the high side. So when they let a contract, then the forest company, whoever it is, has 3 years to fulfill the contract, and that way they can play the timber markets. And that's what they do, but historically you can build some trends. And those trends have been on the high side, as you heard, but we use them, and I think I was told by the treasurer's office, you discount them about 20%, just right off the bat, because they've been high and we want to budget conservatively. And that's how we came up with the 411,000 that we needed to solve this year, which we thought up until today could basically be solved by vacancies and taking some of the money that's sitting in a variety of budgets, moving it back to a central location, having some control on that and talking and not having a major issue this year of meeting our goal of $10 million at the end of the year as an ending cash balance and a beginning cash balance for next year. That number now is probably closer, well, it went up as high as 900,000, but they have this sheet that they just passed out. What we thought we could take up at the 411,000 is now closer to 253. And there's some wiggle room in that because it depends on open positions and when they're actually filled, the bulk of them being in the sheriff's office. So if you take the new revised number and you take out what is certain, the 253, you're left with something around $550,000. That is that the right number then, or was it more than that?
No, that's fine.
That instead of the 411. So we've got to come up with another 150,000. Actually, probably a little more than that. What we thought was going to be 411 that we could backfill now is actually more than that, because the difference between 411 and 253, if you follow, is another 150,000. So realistically, we need to look at somewhere between 550 and 600,000. And tell me if that's the right number. Okay.
In round numbers, yes.
So what we thought we had in hand is now essentially 50% higher. And that still has the variability of the timber sales. Sarah?
So is this surprise something that we should anticipate happening again in the future, or do you think this is a one-off?
I think with the HCP being implemented,
This will continue?
this will continue.
So does that mean your projections for future years are gonna be off too high also?
Yeah.
Which means our next years after this proceeding are also gonna be worse.
Yeah.
That's fine.
I'm just full of good news today.
What are the different color blues?
So the light blue is actual known, so those have actually been open 3 months, 2 months, those are their actual vacancies. Dark blue is projected, anticipated, so those haven't been open those number of months, but we anticipate them to be open, vacant those number of months.
So we have what we thought was a pretty easy step forward. What we were going to do was ask the budget committee to consider a resolution at the next meeting, a month from today, and actually go on the record directing the treasurer to make some adjustments to get us the 411,000. And that number now is 50% higher at least, and could be even more depending on what you believe from the Department of Forestry. And as they will tell you again, the Department of Forestry has been historically on the high side, and so they've discounted it by 20%. And now we don't know because the people have changed a bit and the circumstances have changed, including the HCP, the Habitat Conservation Plan. They may have changed their model and their direction internally. We don't know that. And I don't know, Commissioner Scar, if you're privy to the inside discussions they've had or not on how they're forecasting.
No, I think what's happening right now that just makes it lower and scarier about being lower is that we're operating under the restrictions of the Habitat Conservation Plan right now, which means they're not cutting in areas that they know need to be protected if and when that plan goes into place. But we're also restricted by having to do actual surveys for endangered species right now, so it's just you're doing double restriction on the areas where you can cut, so it's harder to cut more, if it makes sense, because you've got double the restriction on them right now. So once the Habitat Conservation Plan is adopted, the incidental take permits are issued, that will open up some areas that currently are not essentially open for them, because we'll have the known bounds. But, you know, whether that will lead to any increase in revenue is hard to say.
So we have unknowns, which you always have unknowns in a budget, but it's going the wrong way.
Josh has his hand.
Oh, Josh, sorry I missed you. Somebody's gonna have to help me looking at these screens. Go ahead, Josh. Sheriff.
Question and then a comment. So we've got, Sean, you showed 3 documents up there. The first one was just an in general. I didn't quite see where that date came from. I think you updated it on 2/1 is what it said. So early 2024, we got a projection of 4.6 million. July 1, we got a projection of 4.9, and then in October, we got a projection of 4.1.
Correct.
Presumably, we're going to get more projections before the end of the year, and presumably those could go down or those could go up, right?
Correct, we'll get.
We have no idea. We're just guessing, but I just want to make sure we're going to get more projections.
They're now projecting quarterly. They used to only do it yearly. So this is an improvement. By the time we have this next meeting in November, we will have gotten our second payment for the fiscal year, so that will be known and not using their projection. I won't get another update until January from them for the next few quarters. So yes, it could go up, could go down. I don't know, but it's ODF.
Right. Okay. I wanted to make sure, because we're going heavy into altering everything because of this projection. So I was curious if we will be. I thought I heard you say they're doing it quarterly. So I mean, you know, the general consensus seems to be like, you know, raise the flags. We gotta make some serious adjustments right now based off this projection, even though we could get more that are looking better. So I was just trying to clarify that. Second thing I wanted to say is that kitchen supervisor position that is on there, we went a completely different direction with the contracted service, so that position will not be filled. You can take whatever money was set aside for that position for the rest of the year and going into the budget and just eliminate it, because we have a contract in place with a different company.
But wouldn't
So that'll save.
Replace your contract then? Wouldn't those funds replace for that contract then?
Most likely it'll combine in next year's budget, that it'll cover part of that, but the prisoner board money will cover the majority of it, and then most likely some of those funds may have to be redirected. But I can tell you that position is gone. So.
Okay, so let me give you one other item, just that's not exactly related to this, but it's something we talked about this morning with the treasurers. If you go back, I think, let's say to 2010, go back like 15 years, 14 years, the ratio of all personnel costs to the total general fund was 58%. So 58% of the general fund went for personnel costs. That's the treasurer's number. Today, it is just under 70. It's like 69 point something or other. And they had a graph, but they couldn't get it printed from now or whatever. So what I'm saying there is, if you can envision, we're paying over 10% more of the total amount in pure personnel costs, retirement, medical, salaries, wages, everything. Lump it together, and the trend line, if you look at it, it's a wedge, meaning that the total amount is going up of general fund, but the percentage allocated to personal services is going up faster. And mathematically, that can't continue forever, obviously. So I just put that on the table as a point of conversation, because it's manageable, but it's not sustainable, I guess I would say. So did I misspeak on any of that?
No, and I'm just bringing this up because this is what was provided to me and figured it was the best to, in the budget roundtable, to discuss it. I mean, we could choose to wait. I don't know what we're gonna get this quarter, and I won't know until the end of October.
So let me just ask then, open to the group. We have to make some additional adjustments beyond what we thought we would do for this fiscal year. And I don't know that there are too many options other than looking at some other positions and where they're not filled or in the process of being filled, and then move that money around or whatever else. So let me ask my two fellow commissioners and Rachel first before we hear from everybody else. If and this is probably new to some of you or all of us, what's your first reaction and what do we do?
My thought is to stay the course with the plan that we came in here with today and wait until we find out more. Sean just said the end of October. I don't know that it's, just because it's an unknown, I don't know that it's in our best interest today to make additional cuts, not knowing what's actually gonna come in. And we will certainly have the opportunity and the need to make additional cuts later if the numbers are indeed that low.
Hey, Mr. Scar, have you got any initial thoughts on where we go?
No, I can see Commissioner Bell's, point of waiting for that next check. I don't know that the next check is gonna tell us everything or what we really want to know, because the checks come based on what they cut, what they sell, and it could be a big check or it could be a small check, and it won't give us a good overall picture, which is the challenge to that. I guess just for clarity, we have what we call revenue stabilization funds that are intended to buffer this, but they are part of the beginning fund balance that Doug's talking about, right, Sean?
For
Are
next
they
year.
included in that
Next year.
for next year? Yeah, okay, just to clarify that, cause we do, I mean, it's we've set money aside knowing that we're gonna have this give and take. But it is part of the beginning fund balance, so if we just choose to use it this year, it just means we're gonna hit a lower beginning fund balance than what you're targeting, Doug, which makes next year's work harder. So it's sort of a now or then, I guess. But yeah, I mean, we can certainly wait and see what the check is. I don't hold out a lot of hope because they're not even across the quarters. So you can't take that as a trend because it's when they cut. It's complicated.
So basically, we're looking at a 50% increase over what we thought was gonna satisfy this year. And it's not a huge number, it's not into the millions and millions, but it's significant because it's most likely, like I said, with the 70%, you have diminished options where you can go. Rachel, what do you think? You know what's going on here.
Well, when Josh brought that point up, that's where my mind was going to, and I agree with the other commissioners. I feel like we need to I would like to see us stay the course and then get the final numbers, and then for the funds coming in, and then around that time or shortly thereafter, we'll have updated projections, and I mean, we should be continuing to meet anyway to discuss this stuff, and so we'll just, and we're gonna continue looking at cost reductions and revenue increases, and so it all just keeps moving forward, and I think we're gonna take a big bite out of it today, and we'll just we're pretty early in the fiscal year. I know we need to do this now, I think it's a good idea, but I don't think we need to jump the gun, maybe.
Okay.
So now can I
Proceed,
say?
but proceed
Yeah.
cautiously.
When she's done, can I say one other thing? Go ahead. You can do
That was it.
Okay. You know, the other thing we've talked about as a strategy, and this actually came from Mr. Gleason sitting over here, was slow the roll on hiring. And I think if we take a look at this as to where we are now, we know we have a consistent turnover. That it may be that in the second half of the year, some of the extra of that comes from the slow the roll on hiring. Where if we don't choose to act today, which is fine, we can choose not to act today, just putting on the table that if we need to act, so if we come back together in January and we get the next projection and it continues on the same track and our check that came in was smaller or larger or whatever, recognizing that we do actually have perhaps a selected strategy, if people are comfortable with that selected strategy for this is our adjustment tool, is that we may then hold positions open in the second half of the year if we can see with a little bit more clarity what the future holds and say we're not gonna, you're gonna have to wait a month to post or wait 2 months to post, just so we can recognize that additional savings. So I think it's helpful for us at this table to talk about, if it's not good, what does that look like? So that we have sort of some of that thought process done before we get there. I don't know.
Okay, so go ahead, Rachel. Then I want to hear from any others, especially including the budget committee. And then I'm going to suggest something that keeps us moving forward. Go ahead, Rachel.
Do the numbers include the projections for employees going into PERS? That's already been figured in.
Okay, so how about the rest of you now? Our dilemma has worsened, but it's not fatal. And we have some time on our side. This is only almost the middle of October. But the longer you wait, the fewer options you have, and the less time you have to take advantage of it. Time works against us. So we got a bunch of smart people here. You're all smart people. Everybody here's smart. So what do you think, now that you've had this dumped in your lap, is time to be a manager? So let's hear from all the managers in the room, which is everybody. Nick?
So I would start doing the franchisee fee immediately. The city of Tillamook brings in about $800K in franchisee fees. And you'd have to assume that the whole county, we could quadruple, if not, 5 times that amount.
Franchise meaning?
It means that they charge indies a fee for using their easements, like PUD, Verizon, so on and so on.
Mm-hmm.
And so before, the county could not charge a franchisee fee. There was a legislature passed in the springtime in the state of Oregon where we could start doing that now.
Well, that's a good point. We'll make note of that and talk about it. And on the PUD side, I did have another conversation with the general manager and I think one of the board members there. So we can talk about that, and that is a possibility. If we start immediately, that would mean still it would take, I'm gonna say at least 2 to 3 months, because we'd have to go through a process, as would they, and there might be some pushback. So it's not something you can institute next Monday. But let's move it maybe to the top of the list. It's something. So who else has got an idea? Yeah, Chris.
So talking about the franchise fees, so that is something that almost all cities have, but all those franchise or utilities located within the right of way. And I talked to our Oasis road manager, Mike Worley, and no counties do that. It is just how the right-of-ways were established based on the cities and the counties, so there's no counties that do that franchise.
We're not allowed to.
They're different.
We
Right.
can only recoup the cost of permitting in the right of ways, so when they passed that bill last session, it allows us to recoup permit and cost. It does not allow us to just charge the franchise fees across all of them, so counties are still prohibited from that.
That's right.
Bummer.
So that.
There are restrictions, and I'll mention when I discuss this with PUD, you can generate something like every, let's try to find my notes here. You can generate a fair amount of money. 1% I think generates like $250,000. One of the problems that I hadn't really thought through, 40% of the property that would be affected by this is a dairy farm. Now, do you want to have the dairy farms turn on the county because we're charging them some amount of money? And that's a question. That's a policy question. There's something to think about. We can talk some more about it, and and PUD would be an obvious one. The city of Tillamook, I think, is paying 7%. So if your electric bill's $100, you mail in $107. And there's a tiny administrative fee, like way less than 1% that PUD charges. And then that money goes back to the city, as pointed out here by Councilor Torres here. So we could do that, but there are restrictions. And then there's the political side of it. Do you want to tax our 40% of the money would come from dairy farms according to PUD, and they know where the money comes from. So do we want to go down that road? Good question. So who else wants to talk about ways forward here on our current dilemma? Sarah?
Since you're going around the table. So in terms of the overall general fund budget, I like the idea of waiting and see and slow rolling vacant positions. In terms of community development, our reliance on the general fund has been minimal. My thought was to structure, to your point, about 70% of our revenue going to salaries and personnel, but we need the personnel to do the work that we do. I have not done a 3% increase on sanitation and planning fees. I am planning on bringing that forward and staggering that with short-term rentals and building. So every other year, if I bring something forward for board and budget committee consideration with those incremental increases, it continues to make us less reliant on the general fund to open up that general fund revenue for other departments. So that is what I am working on now to bring forward. And I think just those, I'm doing the math on those little increases. There may be, to your point about policy questions, with middle housing and other work that we're doing, we don't have grading ordinances, we don't have stormwater management. There's a lot of jurisdictions, especially in high hazard areas in the water, that do permitting or an actual review of those elements to development to ensure that it doesn't damage our roads and it does not create issues on adjacent properties. I know, Nick, the city of Tillamook has a lot of those things, and Mike, working where you are, those are common practices. They have not been ours, but are coming to the point to where we are going to have to make a decision of whether or not we want to fold those into our development programs. And if that's the case, that could be, I'm gonna have to charge for our staff to do that work. But in the interim, I think for community development, specifically planning and sanitation, which are mandated services and are general fund reliant, it will at least relieve some of that tension and that pressure points to where that money that would normally support those positions out of the general fund can stay there and go elsewhere.
Sarah, do you have a magnitude on that, like for the 3% increase based on your business that you did last year, because this would be going January to June, how much you think that would actually generate in your department, therefore release back to the general fund for this exercise?
Yeah, it depends on the economy. It's an election year, right? So all of those things play into what people want to invest and what they want to build and develop. It would be modest, thinking 20-30,000, but if my overall reliance is 160, that still cuts down on a percentage of proportionality what community development is doing. Yeah, I appreciate that. And our fees are middle of the road. We are not high, we are not low, we're right in the middle. I think with wages and benefits, we could probably go higher than that and justify it, but we also have a housing crisis, so I'm trying to figure out where that balance is.
And I think you're also talking about a little bit longer term than we are with the immediate situation, because
Yes.
it would take a while. So let me ask the budget committee then. You've now heard the dilemma, the revised dilemma. What off the top of your head, what do your three of you have to say?
To be really honest about this, I don't think 15 days is gonna matter. Waiting to the end of October. And if these vacant positions we're actually recruiting right now, they may be filled by the end of the year. So I'm real hesitant if they're already vacant. I would just suggest we leave them vacant. I don't like the fact that they're in safety, that bothers me, but that's my first impression at this point.
Thank you.
I concur, I think we should stay the course. I mean, we know we're gonna have to make some really tough decisions. It appears to me that the biggest, you know, if we're saying 69% of the budget is in personnel, it seems like the elephant in the room is the sheriff's department, right? I come from South Tillamook County where we need the sheriff's department in a big, big way. So it pains me to think that public safety and the sheriff's department would be on the chopping block, but I mean, that's a decision that we'll have to consider.
So maybe our consultant can answer this question. I'm curious on the 69-70% of personnel in the budget, how does that stack up with other jurisdictions?
Well, one of the things that an analysis would be necessary is what was the division of capitalization before? So if you are not capitalizing, which you guys aren't doing, then your ratio changes. So that it may just be a product of that, maybe different than that. That requires some analysis. General funds typically are heavy on the service system, and the range is really heavily predicated on how much capital you're carrying in that fund. And it brings up a good point. That kind of analysis is useful and necessary, but probably beyond your, not technically beyond your capacity, but since you're not directly related to all the other counties and you're not in the business, it's very hard to collect that data. And that'll be true of a lot of the data you have, and to put it in front of you in such a way that you can make sense of it. So I think that should be part of your financial plan.
That was kind of an answer. So I guess my point is kind of to Ken's point is you know, if whether 70% is normal or not, the point is that you either raise revenue or you reduce expenses, and if 70% of the expenses are personnel, at some point personnel is gonna have to be looked at. I'm with the sheriff in regards to, you know, in January it could shift back up again. I don't like to make bold moves based on estimates that could easily fluctuate. But what I do think is that kind of my point I made last time is even if you don't do something immediately, I think you need to anticipate what that might be and have a plan A and a plan B in place so that, you know, you can stay the course to get to the 411, but you better know what plan B is if it goes up to the whatever it is, 550, 600, and not then wait till January, say, oh, oops, now here we are, now we have to do something.
And that's the same when we talked about the short-term rentals as being a key piece of the pie going forward. But if we get that before the voters in May and plan it on the next year's budget and it should fail, we need a plan B because you've only got 45 days left.
Right. So
until you
the
start
plan
budgeting.
Bs have to be in place all the time, and I just wanna say one other thing is I also do not like the idea of further rating the rainy day fund or stabilization fund.
So we've tried really hard not to call it rainy day fund.
Okay, sorry.
That was Commissioner Bartline term that was like, no.
Because that just compounds the problem
Sure.
later on.
Ken?
So did I understand correctly that we cannot add a PUD franchise fee?
No, I think
PUD is the one
we
you
can.
But you have to get through PUD, according to my conversations with PUD early on. you can do a PUD one, but it has to go through our board and their board to get it approved. So it's not like we just decide and do, but because it's a fee, it doesn't have to go in front of the voters.
Right.
But yes.
So I would, go ahead.
I would say yes, and that was one of the short-term strategies that left off with. That I think Nick was bringing back to us.
And how much, do we know how much that might be?
We don't know how much, but he's saying the city brings in
Well,
70.
Todd told me, if I can find it here, it's fairly, 1%, I think, generated about $250,000 a year. 1%. Now, the city of Tillamook is at 7, I believe, right?
Yeah, well, total, we bring in over 800K total in franchisee fees.
I'm pretty sure, because I looked at it when I was on the PUD board, we get a report every month, and it ranges from 5 to 7. All 7 cities have a franchise fee. I think the lowest is 5 and the highest is 7, and it returns money to them minus a very modest accounting fee. And it's pure money at their discretion. There's no categorical restrictions. What Todd told me when I discussed it the other day when I was over there, is it would generate, I think, and I'm looking for it here, generate roughly $250,000 for every 1 point. So if you set a 4% franchise fee, that's $1 million. And his caveat was 40% approximately of the property that would pay this are dairy farmers, including the creamery itself. And so to the extent there would be a political blowback or something saying, why are we taxing our people who are barely making it now and blah, blah, blah. Do we want to go down that path at all?
The argument to that is, we've talked about bonds, we've talked about other measures for property owners. You could apply that same rationale. Why are we creating additional burden on them as well?
Very true. And if you own something, you own real property, you're going to pay. This is just one more, and he just pointed that out, and I couldn't disagree. It's a caveat. That's all it is, because we're known for dairy farms, and they occupy a substantial share of our land and pay, as you would tell us, Cassandra, what does the dairy industry pay? The creamery itself is the largest. We know that because you just told me.
What percentage?
Yeah, but I mean the dairy farms themselves. Do you have that number at all? Even approximate?
Well, the thing is that they're specially assessed. So it's not as much as you think it would be, because it's farmland. So they don't receive a value like a residential lot. They receive a lower value.
Okay, well now keep in mind, it's not based on the value of land. It's based on their electric bill.
Farmland brings in $2,713,239, but that's not just what the county gets, that's total of the tax revenue, so
It's not very much.
3.63%.
So, but we're talking about on a fee on your electric bill. So like I said, if your electric bill is $100 in the city of Tillamook, you'll mail in $107. If your electric bill is $100 in South County, you'll mail in $100. That's the difference. So if we said, okay, if we added 4% countywide and our board agreed to it, PUD board agreed to it, and we just did it, that would generate $1 million a year, round numbers.
Would our fee be on top of the cities or just in unincorporated Tillamook County?
Unincorporated only, good question.
Okay, well
And-
then,
and-
because there are dairy farms within the city of Tillamook and they're already paying the 7%, but we wouldn't be doubling up on that.
No.
Okay.
And that's a good point, because we're talking unincorporated areas, which is a large part of the county. And one person I know, some of you would know him, wrote me a pretty lengthy letter about our dilemma here, because he's been listening in and paying attention, and he had some advice, and he said, and I can agree with this, our electric rate is 8 cents per kilowatt hour. And that's about 5 cents lower than all 3 of our neighboring counties. Clatsop County, Pacific Power, Portland is Portland General Electric, and then Pacific Power and parts of Lincoln County. When you go further south in Lincoln County, you go to Central Lincoln PUD, but our rates are roughly 2/3 of our neighbors. So you can make an argument that we have a bargain. So do you wanna add a little more money to it? It needs to be on the table, I'll just leave it at that.
Josh has his hand up online.
Yes, go ahead, Josh.
Okay, thanks for calling on me. I kind of hide with that there. So first off,
Speak up, I don't always look up, just speak up if you wanna say something.
all right. Well, I don't want to interrupt anybody. So first off, I'm glad because the first portion of this meeting was starting to expend a lot of energy into what are we going to do? Sky is falling. We got a bad projection. Let's start cutting stuff, right? So I'm glad that we're now spending some energy on thinking about the other side of it and some revenue. I'm glad that maybe we're going to slow our roll and pump the brakes and not which is kind of what we've talked about doing anyways, and just being level and even and not having this up and down spikes based on we wanted things to level out. So I'm glad we're at that point. Secondly, we can discuss the PUD franchise fee all we want here, whether we want to or not, but really we can't make number one, the Board of Commissioners are going to be the one to make that decision. We as a group can give our input, but ultimately there's 3 people sitting in this room that are going to be the ones that make that decision based on these conversations. We need to get a representative from PUD in here. Number one, I'm a big fan of the PUD franchise fee. I know that it doesn't politically, sit easy with everybody, and there are some downfalls to it, but there's also some big pluses to it. The 40% farmland, I'd love to know, I realize I don't doubt the information being given to you, but I'd love to see that on paper. I know when we first started talking about the franchise fee, I thought 1% was 500,000, which would mean 2%, a very minuscule 2% meant $1 million. So I'd love to be able to have a conversation with PUD or have somebody spearhead getting documentation or having them come here it doesn't have to go to the voters. It doesn't take an extreme amount of work in the big picture. It really is just our board communicating with their board and then both boards passing it, and then it can be implemented. You may need some community outreach. It may just be, look, the county needs income. We are lower than any other place in the area on our fees. We don't charge franchise fees. This is just an appropriate move that the county is making. It's not a money grab per se. But the reality is we can't make that decision here. We need more information. We need somebody to get either PUD at a seat at the table with some documentation and information so that our 3 board members can make a decision. Because a lot of things, we've actually been talking about the speed of government, if we don't make some moves, it's going to be next thing we're going to blink our eyes and it's going to be 6 months from now and we still won't have any money coming in. When we could, in theory, within the next month, pass a board order and have PUD pass it and we could be collecting money within a month. I really think it's that simple. And maybe it's, nothing's really that simple, I guess. But
We wish it was, but it's close.
yeah, until we get PUD on board with some actual projections and what is it 40% farms or is it 30% farms or is it 35 or 38 and it's just rounded up, maybe it's 43 and it's rounded down, and they pay less in real property taxes, but is it really unreasonable to ask them to pay a little more on a PUD bill? It's not everybody that owns property. It's everybody that uses electricity and pays that bill in Tillamook County. That includes renters, that includes a lot of things that don't actually pay property taxes. So I think it's a very reasonable option that could get us income in a very, very short order. I think the possibility of the TLT tax increase, I think legislative measures that may come up, if we can start backing those, we have an opportunity to look at increasing our revenue. And I'd love to see a lot of energy focused to that as opposed to the other side. Anyways, that's my 2 cents. I think we need to get PUD in here with some documentation, with estimates, farmland, residents, etc. And so that way our board can actually take that information and make an educated decision. And I think the sooner we do it, the better.
Okay, thank you, Sheriff. And that's, I did find my note here. It's 250 to maybe closer to 300,000 for 1% in unincorporated areas. And 35 to 40% comes from the creamery and the dairy farms combined. That's what, let me go down here, Michael.
I'm just gonna suggest telling people that you're not paying that much in utility taxes, utility fees is not gonna be a great selling point. Nobody ever likes to pay more money even though they're not paying as much as their neighbors. People don't like to hear that. I'm hearing a lot of focus on the franchise tax. I didn't know that was gonna be the only thing we're talking about, but if I understand it, you said the county board has to approve it and then it goes to the PUD. Is there gonna be
Well, I think-
pushback for the PUD?
Both boards would have to approve it, whether it be simultaneously or one and then over to the other, or a joint meeting. I think there's several ways forward. I don't know, Commissioner Bell, what do you think? Procedure to do it.
I'm not familiar with that process, but I think your idea is sound. It could be a joint meeting, or it could be we start it and send it over to them.
I think it's fairly straightforward, Rachel, and then we got Joel on, we could ask him if he knows.
Yeah, I was gonna say, it is a pretty straightforward process, but there's gonna be a couple of meetings and there's more fleshing out to do. I thought part of today's discussion was to identify what we wanted to move forward with.
Yeah.
So I'm hearing we wanna move forward with this, so then we would ask staff to start working with PUD to bring back some.
Well, we got off track a little bit here, and it was mostly Nick's fault because he started. So I'll bring us back on, but before we do that, Joel, we've got one of our attorneys online. Have you been listening carefully, Joel, on the franchise fees? Do you know anything about that just off the top of your head that you could add before we move back on track here?
Sure, Commissioner. I mean, I think your discussion has been well on point, and I agree with Rachel. I think, if this is a priority, then we can start to communicate with PUD and move it forward and coordinate, when it would go before their board versus our board, things like that. But yeah, I don't see any major hurdles at this point, as long as PUD is open to it.
Well, that would of course be up to them. I will tell you that the cities, the authorization for the city is in statute, and I think that statute changed to go to unincorporated areas.
I want to make one more point, and that is, I'm not disagreeing with any of this, franchise tax, if that's low hanging fruit, we can go after it, it's fine. I'm just suggesting that the community, when you raise this fee, then we're also going to them in November for the communications, and you're going to them in May for the TLT tax, even though that theoretically won't hurt them, and we're potentially going to them with other things. People can only take so much until they just say no matter what you ask for. So I just think there needs to be some sort of a communication plan or something with the community, so they know what's going on, and instead of just saying all of a sudden, we're asking the community to pay more on the utility bill, they're gonna pay more on their property taxes for the communication system, they're potentially gonna do there's just gonna be a lot of times you're gonna be going to the well, and people are not gonna like that so much.
Their eyes will glaze over.
Right.
That's right. Okay, so let me go over to Mike, and then I want to jump down here to item 4, just for a couple of minutes, make sure everybody's aware of what's happening, and then we can move on, and I'll give you what I think is a summary of what we're just talking about. Go ahead.
Good discussion. Before you pull in the PU at the commissioner level, you need to have somebody, you've heard me say this before, your eyes will roll. You need to develop the rate case for that particular issue, and that deals with the details of who's paying, how they're paying for it. You need to do it in conjunction with the PUD, so everybody's working off the same number. And you do need to do it outside of this organization. One, for credibility, people want to hear what somebody else has delivered and documented. But secondly, you want somebody that knows what's going on throughout the state. And useful discussion, but at this point it's speculation, and it's got to get down to factual representation before you can move to the next step. And there's a real tendency, not just here, to just jump into a solution set and all of a sudden discover that, like you say, they're a lot of blowback because people don't know what the hell you're talking about. That's one point. Second point, on the capitalization issue, I was too obscure, I think. The reason that personnel ratio changes has to do with the third income, which is, yes, we can make cuts, yes, we can get new revenue, but the third potential and underutilized often is the increase in productivity. And increases in productivity are not trivial. They come to you over time. But a good example is if you're capitalizing properly, your maintenance costs will go down. And if you're capitalizing in automation, your operational costs will go down. So the ratio of capitalization to people really is a function of productivity and so that's why I made that particular comment.
So let's go back then, and see if we can summarize number 3, which is where, what we talked about the target numbers now, we've agreed that they are changing based on our treasurer's office, and they've gone the wrong direction. But we also, I think I'm hearing a consensus that we don't have to solve it today, but it'll be on the rolling forward agenda and we'll know more as time goes on. And as soon as we get a concrete estimate again, then this group can reevaluate and see if we're in a deeper hole or if we're beginning to climb out. And at least, and we have at least 3 recent projections and they're all over the board by almost $1 million. And, it takes 2 points to make a trend line. And so if we said where we are today and one more, then maybe we could have a more current trend line where they're going up or down. Does that make sense? So we don't have to solve that today. We just have to all acknowledge the landscape has changed. We still have a problem before us. And if we're going to reach our $10 million goal of an ending balance, we're going to have to come up with better than $500,000 between now and June 30th. So here's what we could do. In addition to that, maybe we could ask staff to prepare a resolution for the budget committee to consider at the November meeting. It's formal noticed meeting, but leave the amount blank. And then we could formally start some direction over to the treasurer's office to do this, that, or whatever we want to do. Does that sound reasonable? Rachel, what do you think of that?
You lost, when you said blank, I was like, huh?
Well, you'd say the budget committee would direct staff to do ABC being blank. One of them is to begin adjusting or holding positions open or whatever it is. In other words, start the process, but leave the details out until we get further information from the state. Maybe it doesn't take that long to write a resolution, but if the budget committee is gonna act on it a month from today, you're gonna need a certain amount of notice for a public meeting and what they're gonna consider, right?
Correct, yeah, I think we could have I don't know if we can have more than one resolution. I mean, I know what we do for the Board of Commissioners meeting, we can adjust things on the fly, but I don't think that's the case with the budget.
Budget. I'd have to look.
Well, and then can we figure that out? So what I'd like to see, and maybe I'm off base, is have the budget committee, all 6 of us, prepared to take an action that tells staff what to do. Because if that happens in November, by the time they get something actually going and look at it and get it in place, it's December. And December is essentially a useless month because of all the holidays. So we're talking the first of the year. That only leaves 6 months to put all this together. In the meantime, we got to look at the $3 million problem for next year's budget. And we'll get to that in a few minutes.
So there's a couple pieces there. I think what you're saying is the budget committee would give direction to staff on things to do or not do.
For this year.
For that year, I think that's easy and would, maybe even come through the board of commissioners at a board meeting. I don't know if that's necessarily a budget committee decision, but they can inform the board of commissioners. If we're talking about changing the budget,
And that has to be
that would
noticed.
be,
Yeah.
and if we don't do it in November, it could be in December, maybe there's a couple, if it's not clear in November what it should be, there could be a couple of options that they're not gonna take action on, that they could finalize that they wanna take action on it, and then that, cause you have a December meeting too. So I think you have some flexibility
Okay.
to make sure it's done right. Have
So
the right
does that-
pieces in there.
People comfortable with that then? In other words, we're not gonna make any decisions today, but we're gonna prepare to make a decision in November. Now, that's the government kicking the can down the road, but not really. It's a group of people that are making a considered decision to deal with it when we know more and have more boundaries. Does that make sense?
Chris, you've had your hand up for a while.
I do. And I get the not kicking the can down the road, but we've been doing this for a while and we've had a number of low hanging fruit that we could have gone after that we haven't seemed like we've gone after. But say the projections of ODF stayed solid and we were able to make our imbalance hit where we wanted to by solving that $500,000. Not quite the right number. But say that had the 400,000 that we were off, say we hit that $400,000 and we were able to resolve that, next fiscal year it gets worse. We haven't done anything to correct the next fiscal year.
That's the second half of today's meeting.
Right. It just seems like I know we're kicking the can down the road, but we're not because we're making a conscious decision in November to move forward. But we've had a number of low-hanging fruit out there that we haven't seemed like we've gone after. It sounds like we're gonna move forward in that direction. A little frustration, sorry.
But along those lines, the only thing I'm hearing, I think, direction from is to start exploring the franchise fee, but I don't know if I've actually heard that firmly enough. So before we move on, I wanna know if there's other alternatives, cause I think there may be some others to proceed with that's not just the franchise fee. So yes on the franchise fee?
Yes.
Then I would love to hear other suggestions that you have, Rachel.
I'm just going off of the short term.
Well, we're gonna get to the ones and twos here in a minute, a few minutes. Can you hold off on that a little bit?
I was just bringing it up because we were talking about one already,
Right,
but
right.
go ahead, yeah.
Yeah, that's one, and I think it's a very viable option and it deserves more attention. Because it's fairly easy to implement, it can generate significant money and it's perpetual. And maybe it's a hard sell, maybe not, but that's something, but procedurally, it's significantly easier than going before the voters or something like that. So let me move on and we'll come back to that, but I wanna cover one other thing before we start talking about the bigger numbers and a way forward, and Mike's got some information that he wants to share with us, but so let's go down to item 5 and talk about what the county has done, and we've done it rather rapidly, and I think most everybody's on board. But we've created, and I'll ask Commissioner Bell and Commissioner Scar to chime in here. Today, we approved creation of a central services department. And that happened pretty fast, and we've heard from some people say, well, I thought you were talking about that sometime in the far future, and we finished it today. In other words, it went on the record today, we're creating a central services department, and we appointed Rachel as the Chief Administrative Officer of Tillamook County. Now, she hasn't built her job description, and we haven't set a salary for her and all that.
We have not built the job description.
Yeah, she has not. But we're there, we took a first step, and some people I've heard from say, my goodness, you just start talking about it and now you're already taking an action. Well, as Commissioner Scar pointed out, the square concrete wheels of government go pretty slow, but here, this is lightning speed for government. But we've taken some advantage and seen what's there. So Commissioner Bell, could you speak to that like you did this morning, make sure we're all.
Well, yes. So we're, as you all know, probably everybody in this room is already here to talk about this. So in brief, we identified through the process of the strategic plan that central services is something that we wanted to focus on, that we wanted to improve. And we learned that other government systems have central services together under one umbrella, and apparently it works better that way. And we do not, obviously, we have not. So what we decided to, in the strategic plan, we identified that we were going to explore a central services model. And the exploration morphed into action when we looked at the timeline for it, and we realized, well, right now we're lacking an HR director, we're recruiting an IS director, and both of those departments would be under central services. So if we're gonna make a change, now is the time to make the change. And when we looked at, would it be, if we slow roll it and stand it up next year, is there any advantage? There was no advantage to waiting, so we wanted to just do it now because we have the need right now. We had the need previously. So that's why we just moved right into action. And in a meeting with the sheriff recently, leadership meeting yesterday, now all my meetings are running together in my mind. The sheriff pointed out that we could have done a better job of communicating to you all, and I agree with that, and I apologize. I wish that I had thought of that. He made the excellent point that if we had just sent a letter to leadership and said, hey, join us for the board briefing and you'll know more about what we're thinking, that would have helped. And so I'm sorry that didn't happen, and I wish it had, and we'll try to do better about communicating more clearly and in a timely way. So, and I appreciated that conversation because we really need your feedback, so we know that there are ways that we can improve and we want to. So, Rachel will be the Chief Administrative Officer. She will lead the departments that are in central services, which are facilities, legal, HR, IS. Am I missing anything? Maybe not. So
Say it again.
legal, facilities, HR, IS.
Legal,
BOC.
yeah, BOC.
Oh, and us.
And us. Continue to lead us.
I get to oversee you now.
Oh, what the hell?
Wait a second. I'm just kidding.
Wait, you're not agreeing with that
Yeah,
yet?
wait a minute. And that, we're in the process we're in right now is for Rachel to come back to us with a plan. We're excited about the possibilities of this. For one thing, we're not talking about adding another executive because we don't have the money to add another executive, and there's a tremendous risk if we were talking about recruiting an executive level person to do this work. Who knows whether we could get a successful recruitment, who knows who we would get. It would take God knows how long to orient them to our system, and then we'd all have our fingers crossed that it would be, I don't think I would have supported that for a variety of reasons. However, with Rachel on staff, who is totally qualified to do this work, and she has a plan for how she can redistribute her workload. So she'll continue to take care of some of her responsibilities, and other things are wrapping up, and some project management stuff is wrapping up, and we'll move some stuff around. So we won't have to add a position. We'll be able to move forward with this on a sort of trial basis, like let's check it out. Let's see if it works for all of us. Let's see if the services we all receive are improved. Let's see if she likes it. Let's see if we like it. And I'm optimistic. I think it's a good idea, and I think that this time next year we will all be able to. It's my hope that we'll all be able to say, yeah, that was a good idea. That's working really well.
Thank you. Commissioner Scar, did you want to weigh in on that? It's a pretty significant change and it has long-term implications for sure.
Sure, no, I think my colleagues have done a good job of describing it. The part that I have been taking in the conversation, we'll just reiterate here, is it is not a county administrator position. We are not tasking Rachel with running absolutely everything in the county. Rachel will be running the central services pieces of the county. The commissioners will continue in our liaisonship roles. We'll continue to have interaction with our department heads, continue to have interactions with the community. In fact, we hope to increase our interactions with our community because we will not be in the weeds that we are today in the central services departments that we're overseeing. We will be stepping away from that piece of the work, concentrating it under one person who can do that much better than we can, and really leaving ourselves in the role of decision makers. But again, it's not an administrator. She is not also going to be overseeing all of the service-based departments. That will continue to be the commissioner. So I think that's an important distinction, just based on some of the concerns and comments that we heard, is that, you know, well, what are commissioners gonna do if Rachel's gonna run the whole county? Rachel's not gonna run the whole county. Rachel's gonna make sure that HRIS, BOC, legal are working together, and that she will work very closely with Sean and her team, since that's the financial piece, which is, you know, tied into much of what happens in there. So, you know, it's just taking that central services piece, the part where we provide services to our departments, where you are our customers, and really creating that in the best possible way. So I mean, I'm excited about the change. I think it will be really good for us. I think it will be good for our departments, which in turn will be good for our constituency. So it is fast. I'm excited about that. Like I said, stone wheels uphill. It's excited to have done, and I mean, it seems fast, but there's 18 months of work behind this with the strategic plan and everything that's been done with it. So while it feels fast, it's just the culmination of a long body of work.
Okay, thank you. Rachel, can you say something about it, just your initial impression?
I feel like I'm repeating myself too.
I think we've
Yeah,
done this
I'm excited about it. I'm excited to start working with everyone and crafting what this is gonna look like, hearing what people, how they wanna benefit from this, what they wanna see, what they don't wanna see, and just seeing where this goes so we can provide better service across the board. I also did wanna clarify, cause it hasn't really been talked about publicly, I don't think, is when this starts, the appointment happened today, but it's not, nothing's changing yet from a practical standpoint. It's business as usual until all of this gets worked through, job description gets finalized. There'll be another board order, so as early as mid-November at the earliest, I would see a potential change, but it may be later than that, depending on how these discussions go. There'll be board briefings with everyone, and we will send information out to everyone saying that the conversation will be happening, and so lots more to come, and there's lots of questions still to go through, but we're excited.
Michael, you looked like you were gonna ask a question.
Well, I'm excited for y'all. It's nice. So my question is this budget neutral?
Not entirely, although we'll have to adjust her salary in some fashion, simply because there's a different and maybe higher level of responsibility. I would say by the end of the year, and certainly over the next year or two, it will be, there'll be some savings to realize, like Mike points out. So let me ask Mike to say a few words, because he's been a driving force behind this too, on central services. And like I've said in others, I've worked for two large groups, and they had exactly the same thing. One was called support services, and the other was central services. And it included all the things that you heard and a few more. It also included in both areas a fleet services, which we don't have here exactly, but I don't know how many vehicles the county has. How many do we have, Treasurer?
About 120.
A lot.
A lot.
About 120.
120 vehicles. So, you know, there's an argument to be made sometime in the future that we should have someone, a professional fleet manager, maybe do some of our own maintenance, bring it in-house, and those kinds of things. I mean, that's a make or buy decision, but that's down the road. So Mike, could you go ahead and speak to this just briefly, and then I'm gonna tell you where I think we ought to go here over the next rest of this meeting.
You're asking me to speak briefly? I'll try my best.
Cut you off here.
I'll try my damn bandana. This appears to be happening very fast. And I guess I'm the villain in that story. As I examined where we were going, and somebody pointed out that, you know, we were talking about putting this together, but we were talking about doing it over a time frame, and we're gonna be involved in it, all of a sudden bang, here's here. As I looked at the dilemmas that you're facing, pace became very important, as people have been saying in this room, that if we don't jump on this right away, writ large, the whole financial plan, all that kind of stuff, we're gonna be so far behind the 8 ball, we're gonna eat too much of our seed corn, which is significant dilemma. And so I suggested to the board, no, I didn't suggest, I said, here's my recommendation, and we need to proceed. At that, but Rachel said, okay, that's true, Mike, but let's get the board to make the order so that you know we're going this way. Let me spend some time with the organization to make sure that it fits. So the conversation about what it really is yet to come. That conversation is gonna start with Rachel now that the board has said that, but the piece is not put together yet, the character, the design. So you're not out of the wavelength on that. It is unfortunate, and I feel like I had played some element in that of not communicating. As you're a department head and a senior leader, I know nothing is worse than having something happen and then your staff comes to you and you have to go, I don't know, nobody talks to me. And to the extent that happened, I just really apologize. That's one of the things we're trying to fix, frankly, and by doing this, so.
Okay, well,
Short as I
thank
can
you.
get.
So where we are, I think now we've decided that we've got some significant decisions to look at in coming up in November, and we'll have more data from the Department of Forestry and may be able to give some directions. In the meantime, we'll let it evolve and simply know where we are and where we appear to be heading. And then we talked about our central services and just so more people know what's happening and what the financial impact would be, and we think it will be positive over the long haul. And then the current fiscal year, we talked about that as well. We will wait and see, but it'll evolve and they'll have to make some decisions sometime in probably the next 60 days to give direction from the budget committee to staff to do something or not do something that ought to formally come out of the budget committee. So this is a budget committee meeting. So after that, I'm gonna call a break here for about 10 minutes, but when we come back, here's the exercise I think we should do. We talked about a strategic plan which has been adopted, and then as a component of that, going forward is a financial plan. And we want to talk a little bit about that, and again, we'll have Mike elaborate on that, and Rachel's got some ideas on how that should evolve. But I'll start with Mike when we come back, and he's gonna talk about a way forward for the next fiscal year. And he and I have had a couple of conversations, and essentially what he's gonna recommend in some detail is that we take the options that we have examined so far, and we've ranked them 1 and 2 and some other things that are short-term and long-term. And he'll kick them over to this firm and ask them if they can come back in 30 days with at least a draft plan of how to get us to the $3 million. And so when we come back, he can explain that, but then I wanna go through the 1s and 2s and maybe get. It's pretty nice out there.
I agree with
Sorry, Sean.
Yeah, yeah, I agree with you. I wanted to go for the increase in November. And I was overshooting because there's a possibility.
So 146K, that's a 1.5% gas tax.
So I didn't want to do anything.
Some of those things, when you go to.
4 gas
I think that
stations,
needs to be a
3
conscious
are
as far as
privately
when
owned, and
things
then there's
get
the
rolled
shell
out
out
in
for
the
the
voters.
car lot.
And I think that's a very wise
And
statement, but
that's
some of
something
these
you might wanna
are
exempt
not
a car lot
controversial at
because
all.
the loggers
and really
are
use
vehicles that
I agree. I support the central
It's not like
service.
stuff
It's been talked about.
So that would be a huge expense to them and the tourists, they don't use their car lots. So that's something that might be
Yeah,
a
no,
better sell.
Yeah, so I.
After all the gas stations, exemption of car lots.
So the city gets 146,000.
Yeah.
It makes perfect sense.
And it's a 1.5%.
We'll save you on scrapping.
But
Just
if
going forward.
you're wanting
Mine-
the cities in South County to incorporated at 1.5% could be higher.
No, the red one, red plastic.
Yeah, I don't mean all
It's
those.
a pretty tough sell.
Push on the red
I've
plastic.
convened a couple of different meetings and it's like 60-40, leave us alone.
Well, the,
Things are.
you were
things are
just
moving on.
polling the people in South County, which are probably more
There you go.
country
Number of
conservative.
It's fine, it's tough to yellow,
The people in North County,
It's between the weather and the timber and the.
kind of the environmental
Yeah,
type
we're-
Capitalization part.
Spring's gonna
If
be
you don't
good
have the capital
initiatives.
if the weather permits.
And Escobar's not really conservative, they're pretty.
Right.
Allows us to catch up on some other projects on the drainage
Yeah,
project.
they got some big houses.
So never dull moment.
True. What's the status on the water diversion from the
It's hard to become more efficient.
It is, we've got an archaeology report that's.
Well, we try to raise it in the
So they
city of
required
Toma
us to redo the
from
archaeology.
1.5 cents to 6 cents during the
So
summer
the
months.
ordinance came in
And 3 cents during the winter months.
Our design is 5
Failed.
cents, so
Failed by-
instead of continuing to hold off on those folks are doing the final wrap up on our specifications based on the
The
design.
city of Toma are gonna.
So I'm hoping they put that thing up.
Well, I can understand why.
The numbers from FEMA,
Yeah, nobody wants to pay more gas, but
so the very first thing is.
I just like the fact that the tourists had to pay it too. You know, I'm willing to bite the bullet if they had to pay it.
And you're through the college,
So-
you get a discount.
Next summer, right, we had hoped
Well, could
that,
you get it for free for all
cause
of
there's
us?
work
Yeah.
on Third Street. That
I have the Muriel.
Yeah, it could be done in a minute.
Okay.
It's the work of the fairgrounds road, so you can't touch the water drop before the fair starts.
Okay, it's awfully nice outside, let's don't stay here all day. Okay, so what we're gonna do now is, as I said before, I'm gonna ask Mike to talk a few minutes about a way forward being all of us who have now taken us to where we've got a big long list of items. We've categorized them, 1, 2, 3, and 4, with 1 and 2 being something that is really quite possible, can be done. There may probably a few obstacles. One of them, if you remember, we talked about things that would affect employees. Then another one is increased revenue in the short term, and then increased revenue in the long term, and then some other miscellaneous things. And we probably left a few things off the list, but so what Mike has suggested, and I think it's a good suggestion, is that we bring in another set of eyes. A firm that does this sort of thing and has for some time, and they've looked at jurisdictions probably in several states. And we do that with the understanding that it's a fool's errand to try and reinvent the wheel. Some group, organization, local government has been up against this situation, much like we have. Maybe the numbers were different and people were different, and maybe even some of the issues. But there's a number of things you can do, and so we want somebody who does this for a living or has done it for quite a number of years to have a look at it. And there'll be a modest cost, probably less than $20,000, maybe less than that. And you say, well, why in the world would we spend $20,000 when we're looking for $600,000 this year? Well, sometimes you gotta spend money to make money. And that's my answer, and I'm not trying to be a smart aleck, I'm just saying that you get what you pay for. And if we want advice and we want experienced eyes and smart people, you're gonna have to pay for it. But we've got some connections now with Mike and his group and others, and maybe people you know as well, who can say, okay, this county over in Idaho had a very similar situation 3 years ago, and here's how they fixed it. So that's what we want to learn. So Mike, why don't you take it away and talk about that? And then I'd like to go through and at least validate where we have the 1s and 2s. Are we still in agreement that's an option, and should we ask this firm to look at it? Because we'll define their scope of work a bit. We'll identify the problem, but they'll see this material and they'll say, well, you guys have come a long ways towards it, or this is the dumbest idea we've seen in 32 years. You know, I don't know. So Mike, go ahead.
All right, thank you very much, Commissioner. The next step in this strategic plan, which we just initiated, is to get in front of the organization a a financial plan, a strategy. What are we gonna do? What is the methodology? How do we know that the facts are what they are? That kind of work needs to be done, and it needs to be done post haste. Because as we stand here today, and people cannot agree on what the numbers are. Everybody's got their own number and how it got produced, and that is no place to start. You have to come to an agreement, and that means you have to establish the methodology for making that number. You have to have a discussion about how that number is made, and then you produce the number. You don't have the resources organizationally, or the time, or probably even the energy, to do all that work and to do it well. People do that stuff for a living. I know several of them, and I'll be making a recommendation to the board as to who they might want to get an offer from. There isn't a particular company, there's several of them, and I know some of them that are very, very good. I'm hoping that we can get at least the foundations of what we're going to be doing in front of the board and the leadership staff by sometime in mid-December. It's almost imperative that we do. So we're going to be flying fast and low. What you'll get in mid-December is not a financial plan. What you'll get is the explanation of what pieces need to be developed in that plan. And the key system is that these people have to teach the organization how to do it in the future, so that you don't have to reinvent this wheel every afternoon. We don't want to be out hiring these people 4 years from now. We want them to be able to say, okay, when you do a rate study, here's how you do it. Here's a rate study for this particular thing, and we'll walk you through the method. And then you'll document the method, and then that'll be your methodology for the next year. The basis of my recommendation, and I'm going a little afield here, not that I don't always, that the foundation for my recommendation is, I got 30 plus pages of notes from people that I've interviewed and talked to, probably 40 people, plus I've read literally hundreds of your various documents to try to get myself familiar with what's going on. So I filtered through my experience, and my experience as being a county manager and a city manager is that the issues that I've heard and felt have been laid at my door several times when I'm in that role. And these are the things that we want to try to fix in the next year. Now, and that's why I felt it was important that you get your organizational structure problem dealt with as soon as you can before you move into your financial planning process, because the two are inexorably linked. So I would often have people come to me and say, Mike, I feel like you're treating me like a mushroom. You keep me in the dark and you feed me bullshit. I suppose I'm guilty at times of that. And that is a concern in the organization. They can't figure out. I've been married to the same person for 57 years, and believe it or not, we still end up with communication problems. So if people that have been around each other that long, you can't hope for an organization of 300+ people to get it all right. But we can get it a heck of a lot better, and we can learn how to hear that we're not getting it right, which was thankfully presented to me by the staff. One of the things that come up is, Mike, I really feel insulted when you say, boy, this year we gotta really tighten our budget. You gotta get down there, find all the details. You gotta get improved productivity. So what the hell you think I've been doing? I'm not here to screw things up. And I never intended that as a criticism, but I can definitely see how you would normally perceive it as an insult. And once again, everybody has to play in this role, and everybody has to respect the hard work that always exists in this organization and the fundamentals that are already out there. And then we gotta make it easier to do things. So that's another reason that I recommended this change. Another thing that they would bring to me is say, you know, Mike, it's really cool. You get to do any damn thing you want. You know the budget inside and out. And anytime you want something, it just appears magically. Where we get to go down on our hands and knees for 2 or 3 or 4 budget times to try to get something we want, and then we get a third of it. It's guilt is charged. Every manager feels that they've got it all figured out, and by God, things ought to go forward. Unfortunately, we reinforce that habit or that perception by slipping up on this communication. And I finally realized that if I'm gonna have other people cutting their budget, then by God, I gotta go first. And that was a hard lesson to help, but it helped clean up the perception. The other thing is that thing is such a fog. I don't know who's doing what. I don't know who's in charge of what. I don't know what the central service charges are. They're just a number. I just don't have a good, clear idea how the mechanics of this thing is working. That really is at the heart of this central service switch, is that the methods by which this organization makes its processes, budgets, financial plans, strategic plans, and appointments, and et cetera, needs to be understood by everybody in the organization that needs to be impacted, and they need to have put their fingers on it. You know, we know as department heads, we're not in charge of the whole damn county, but by God, they gotta hear what concerns that thing causes us, and then we'll see how it works. The second piece of that is we get to reanalyze, in the Army, we used to call it after action reports. We get to reanalyze what we chose so that we can make the adjustments which are automatically gonna come up, so we can continue to improve on it. That is, you're gonna create a more perfect organization or union by continuous improvement. So that's another piece of this effort. And the fifth thing is that, I kind of alluded to this, is that because it's so vague, we don't really know how these numbers get put together. And many of us have been here, 10 or 12 years, Mike, and we've heard this henny penny, the sky is falling several times, and it never occurs. And so we just, we're not gonna buy it until we see it. And that takes us back to that methodology. It takes us back to a better communication model, and it takes us back to the budgeting process that you're currently using. Now, all these processes you've accreted over 15 years, and they got pieces in there that, hell, nobody even remembers how they got in there. And that's one of the things you gotta do, is clean that all up so people can figure out how to put their fingers on this thing and how they get to influence it. And then, I could go on. I don't need to go on. I just want to say that we're really trying hard. And I know the board is really trying hard to fulfill these expectations. And, we won't get it right, but we can't fault us for not trying. And we're gonna be, people are open to the conversations, they're open to the concerns, and we're trying real hard to make sure that we don't make things worse by accident, which is always possible. So that's why we're doing this, and that's why we're doing this fast. And for there.
So these firms that you've mentioned, could you give just, without naming them or going into the individuals, could you say what they've done maybe elsewhere, just so we know what we're gonna be buying and what kind of input they need from us?
Yeah, and one of the most important pieces of input you've produced, which is what do we need to look at? That's really helpful. And we'll be working through a scope of work with the board and with the staff in terms of what actually needs to be in the first step, second step, third step. And a financial analysis team, they are in the business of keeping track of what's doing all the revenues, both municipal and county and school district and other special districts. I mean, that's the business they're in, and so they've got their fingers on what's happening around the Northwest. And that is, they have the database and the contacts, which is a major piece of work that you just don't have the time to do. And the second thing they have is the mathematical expertise of putting together the methodologies and developing the actual math, the analysis work that needs to be done. Now, you guys have analysis and you're skilled at that, but you know, like rate case, I keep saying that as an example. It's not the whole, I don't want to overstate that, but you know, there's a method for doing that. It's a legal requirement to differentiate between a fee and a tax. And there's, you know, ways to do the due process. You need to be able to do that so that you can come forward with a board or a staff person and say, here's what we're doing, or with the creamer or everybody else about, okay, here's how we're trying to do it. Here's math, and also you need it as a defense for a legal charge. Because if somebody should, God forbid, be unhappy enough to hire an attorney, you're gonna be in front of a court and they're gonna obligate you to demonstrate the rate case. And you don't wanna be there just making it up. The other thing that they will be able to, they have budget processes running out their ears. And they'll be able to analyze budget process and give you advice that is sound. An awful lot of these budget processes are invented by city managers who want to get written up in the newspaper, and they rename them every week as to whether it's a program budget or a, you know, blah, blah, blah. The question is, mechanically, what are you doing and why do you want it to happen this way? Also, I want to tell you that they will know, and this is a problem, the focus ends up on the budget as the ultimate decision. The budget is a strategic guess. You don't, that number is a guess compounded by another guess. It is not a checkbook. And the organization needs to know how to get comfortable with the nature of the guess. You can't get a perfect number, but you can get in the range of 2 to 3% per year, which is okay. That's good enough. And you need to understand the methods for doing that and why it is a guess and not an absolute. You also need to get some good handle on what are the assets you have right now, which ones need repair that affect directly your production. And that's something else they can help us do. Every place I've worked, and usually pretty good sized organizations, we always have a financial outside person working on our issues. Not that we didn't have really good capacity in the organization, but we just, it is such a specialized arcane field that, we just can't afford to have somebody dedicated to doing that kind of work. And then, probably some trainings are necessary. The level of knowledge of what this governmental process of budgeting is and the ability to take care of it and the relationship to authority, accounts receivable, accounts payable, all those things is very thin in this organization. That needs to be much thicker, particularly at the department and first line supervision level. If you don't have that base of knowledge, then people make it up. They make up stories about what they heard, and it just leaves you in the dark. So that's what we'll be working on, and,
Okay, thank you. So any questions on that? So we'll hand over this list when we go through it again here fairly quickly. And if the list is, seems to be complete, that will be part of the package you pass on to them and say, okay, this is the work that this group has done, our budget committee and senior staff over the last 3 or 4 months. We've looked at 60 plus options of this, how to solve this dilemma. And then if they can look at all of them, but we'll see how they rank, how we rank them, and if that makes sense as well. So I can just go down this list and see what if we're all still in agreement, or if we've got something to add. And we don't have to analyze them, but I'd like to say that we have an understanding or a consensus that we're all in agreement. These are options, and they'll no doubt have something that we've overlooked, and that's partly what we're buying. So I'll just start on the first group. Maybe we could do it in total, and then I'll talk some more about some of the others. The employees where it got pretty serious, meaning we talked about a 4-day work week and delay opening positions and combining things that we're already doing and talking about, 6-hour work day. Is there any reason we'd change any of those? I think we grouped them well before, saying these affect our staff, and I guess that I would add what one person wrote in an email to me, and something I think we all know. We exist here to serve the people. We don't exist here to provide jobs for each other. And that's yes.
So the restriction on travel, I thought we were not putting that as a 1 or a 2, just because a lot of people have required certification maintenance. So is that?
Well, we listed it under short term, and we didn't actually put a number on it. Number 16, Rachel, do you remember that one?
I recall it being a 1, but it says all, so maybe it should be some.
In our committee, we talked about it as strategic because there is travel that's required. For some people, it's what they do every day for their job. And so they can't actually go out and do inspections for, for planning and things that we've said they can't travel. So I think restrict some travel, I think it needs to be strategic. Also, to Sarah's point, some have to travel to get their continuing education credits. If they don't do that, they can't do what they do. So it just has to be thoughtful as opposed to a blanket.
I would think these people would know that. Wouldn't you think, Mike?
yes, I do.
And that's a good point. So if we pass the employees, then it looks like there are about 10 or 12 items that affect, and some of them are quite significant, like going to a 4-day work week, which has been done. I've heard arguments that makes a lot of sense, and I've heard others that's really about the dumbest thing you can do in an organization. And I don't know, but I'm expecting these people then could say, well, under certain circumstances it might make sense, and otherwise it's foolhardy. Is that, we're gonna get some feedback like that, I hope.
Well, Doug, were we just moving the 1s and 2s forward, or?
Yeah, we are.
Because under a 4.
But I'd like them to look at the employees too. I mean, that's.
Doug, we didn't look at the 4-day work week because we have unions, we'd have to bargain it. It's gonna
True.
impact our general fund and our special revenue fund exactly the same way. So the reason that's 4 is because it just didn't seem like it was viable unless you were gonna shut down the health department 1 day a week, you're gonna shut down the library 2 of its days a week. So it really, because of our union environment, we don't have the ability to tease those apart in that same way. So that was why it landed on a 4, just as background for those who were in that committee.
And we can leave it that way. I'm inclined to send, for my part, and then you can send me other, I'm inclined to give this whole list to them and let them pick and choose. What I was just trying to do is have exactly what we're doing is a conversation, a brief one today. Have things changed, or are we good with sending it on? I guess, we didn't on my sheet here, we don't have a 1 or a 2 on the employee. They were just separate. Was that the last one, Rachel? Do I have the last one?
So what I have shared on the screen is the results of how it was ranked in the middle of the meeting at the last meeting, which was not then distributed because we weren't we were sitting on it.
Yeah.
And my understanding was all of this was going to go to a financial planner to be looking at. Where we are today is a bit of an offshoot of what I'm hearing, taking the ones and twos and seeing if there's something we can do now that makes sense. So we got a
Well,
couple
that
things
or-
floating
or-
around.
Yes, we can do that, and also I wanted to get some of our priorities. In other words, it seems to me it'd be easier for them to start, and Mike, tell me if I'm wrong, but if we said the county has spent a fair amount of time analyzing this, talking about it, and we think the ones are preferable to the twos, or easier to do, or offer a greater return, and they would get a flavor for how we look at this from the management perspective. That's what I was thinking, but is that?
Yeah, I think that, like you say, this whole document is of value to them. And they should come back and say, okay, you know, these three we can do in this time frame, and here's what the revenues are. And, you know, geez, there's one other that you need to put up on the front that we need to get after, kind of thing. And so, you know, you're just putting eyes on, another set of eyes on work that you've already done. And I think it's, you know, it's helpful to have the ones and twos, but it's more helpful, well, it'll be helpful for the whole ranking. That gives them an idea of what you guys are thinking.
Okay, well, and.
But they normally make you go through this process anyway.
And they will understand, or at least in your ongoing conversations, as Commissioner Scarr pointed out, we have, and we talked about this a couple of months ago, we have general fund and special fund. And the special funds are all in balance, they're doing what they do and doing it well, and they have no call on extra funds or support beyond normal stuff. For example, the Parks Department is paying its own way, providing for capital needs. So maybe they don't need to have a hard look at that, but I'm assuming when they've looked at organizations, they know the difference between special and general funds and all of that, and that's pretty normal across the whole business of government. And so, and that's a question I don't have an answer. I keep thinking about, you know, why should the health department take a hit because the general fund has an issue? Well, I don't know the answer to that, but maybe they can help us work through that question. You know, as a matter of equity, and we have two unions, and we bargained in good faith. We have existing contracts, and that's a part of what we're doing. And I'm assuming they know how to do that.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. So then
if they don't, we got the wrong one.
Yeah, yeah, Commissioner.
So I support sending our whole list to the financial contractor and showing them, this is how we've grouped them, these are what we think are our first and second priorities, ones and twos. And they're of course welcome to look through the rest of it and pull out pieces that they think we should take action on sooner. I hope they would do that, that's what we would be looking for. I'm hoping that out of today, getting back to Chris's point earlier about low-hanging fruit, that today we'll look together at the ones and twos and pull out a couple things that we think we wanna get started on right away before we have a financial contractor. And I'd like to just start with the first one on the list. Number 6 is delay filling open positions. During the break, I asked Sean, if you'll go back to this list that we got early in the meeting with the blue box on the top, I asked Sean, so this savings represents positions that are budgeted but weren't filled, and this savings is through September 30th. So my question to my colleagues is, and I'm not talking about a job freeze, but is it, if we just imagine, we're already in October, if we just imagined not filling those through the end of the year, we could probably save substantial money, not least because as people come in after the first of the year, they'll go into PERS. So everybody who goes in between now and the end of December goes into our retirement system, which costs us a lot more. So I would ask the leaders of the departments who have jobs in blue, if there are, and you don't have to answer it now, but please think about, realistically, is it possible for your department to wait until January? Because that could be a substantial savings right there.
Good point.
Well, we're already posted and done with ours, these two property appraiser twos.
They're already hired.
We have interviews soon.
Oh, gotcha.
Yes, we have interviews soon, but we did absorb one property appraiser. So we did lose a position already.
Okay.
But these two that we had postings for, we're gonna interview.
That's a good point, is that there needs to be a method to examine the opportunities. Your point was very well taken in terms of future costs. And can the departments do something different and hold off, or, and it's not, that, the worst thing you can do is point blank say, we're gonna do all of this, because there's so many intricacies in terms of the elements. But that's part of what you want your management team to do, is to look at those opportunities, hold as long as you can, slow the roll. That'll turn into real cash.
So we've set a goal before, so let me jump over to that and leave that where it is for now. The goal that we had for the next year, we know where we are today roughly, although it may change again. We were somewhere between 2.7 and 3.1 or 3.2 million. So if you round it off, it's 3 million for the next fiscal year. Now, we can give them that number, but if you remember, that number does not include any of the capital work. And we said at one time, I think Rachel said, well, you know, for McKinstry stuff, you might as well add another million if we're gonna look to that.
Plus $1 million roof, which we
Plus,
didn't
plus,
know.
yeah, another million. So do we want to give them absolute numbers, or do we say to these folks, do the maximum you can, or give us a high, low, and medium, or how does that work?
Well, you wanna give them all the data that you have. And on the forecasting model, where I can't predict exactly what it's like, but it's common for what every single revenue system you have, and you've got about 60 of them, they will develop a method for determining most likely, highest possible and lowest possible. And that'll give you the band, the statistical band of what should happen. And when you pull that all together, then now you have a forecast. And the forecast is, you know, very similar to the you know, having a problem with weather. You know, where's the hurricane gonna hit? Well, it's a band, it's a whole spaghetti line. And as you get closer and closer to the event, your spaghetti gets narrower and narrower. And that's why your forecast model probably needs to be reviewed at least twice a year and maybe 4 times a year, just because that's what, you know, that's what it takes to keep you on beam. So they take all of these numbers into consideration. I'm really interested in getting these people involved in how they forecast that timber receipt. I just don't buy the state's argument. And you know, if we have to get down to the point where we look at their goddamn receipts, then maybe that's what we gotta do. But you know, maybe I'm just out, but I've been through this kind of dilemma before. And once you get into the wicket there, you usually find something. It's just gotta be better than it is right now, period.
So then in an effort to make this, yeah, Mike.
That's sort of a procedural question, because I'm finding out just about the consultants today. So we've been working at this a couple of months, and now I find out we're gonna outsource this. And I'm not sure what we're doing anymore. So are we waiting to hear back from the consultants before we just, I'm kind of feeling some of the frustration that others in the room are feeling, is that we're talking a lot and now we're pushing it off with consultants. I don't know what their time frame is, and then we're all of a sudden in December, the first part of the year, and we haven't really done anything yet. I guess I'm sort of confused on what the plan is.
Well, that's a good question, and I will tell you quite honestly, I was too in a way when we started talking about this. And see if I can draw an analogy of some sort here. Let's say that we've been going along and making some progress, and all of a sudden, you know, we were taking our pills and doing our exercise, but now we find we need a specialist. So the doctor says, now you gotta go see a specialist for one thing or another. I don't know if that's a very good analogy, but I think maybe we've come to a point after talking with Mike a while, and we can massage these. We can say, okay, but the next step would be implementation. And do we need to focus, or I guess I'd like a second opinion. Let's put it that way. We have a collective opinion here through our numbering scheme of ones and twos and some fairly detailed discussions and some pushback. All of that has happened over the last few months. But we're at a point now, we have a target, we have all these 60-some variables. Maybe it makes sense to have another set of practiced, experienced eyes say, look, you guys have done good work, but you've forgotten this, or you guys are crazy as hell. You don't know what you're doing, and here's the way the other people do it. And I don't know where the middle is exactly, but I think maybe it's time. I don't know. Let's talk about that for a minute, because we haven't given him anything other than maybe it sounds interesting.
Well, because it seems to me is like we're talking a lot, but nobody wants to make a decision.
Well,
and
yes,
and we potentially run into the same problem with the consultant. So another person tells us what they think, and then somebody still has to make a decision.
We do, but maybe we have information we don't have now, and I guess that's right.
But it keeps pushing off into someone's. I mean, Chris's point earlier is like time's ticking, and the $4 or $6 million or $600,000 is now, and then the $3 million is every day goes by, we're closer to that, and we still haven't done anything. I'm not feeling the urgency that I think that needs to be there.
If I could,
Let's go to Rachel first, and then Mike, you can pick up.
So I think we have a couple of things going on here. We have the long-term financial plan, which is longer term, that pulls all this together, as well as procedures and a lot of other things, budget process, whatever else. Then we have our low-hanging fruit, which I think we can use the rest of the time today perhaps to talk about those that we wanna do and setting up whatever we need final decisions on, if we need final decisions on them in November. And then third thing is giving this whole list to a consultant to help us move some other pieces of implementing those together. So I think we have three different things that have started to kind of come out. That's my interpretation of where we are.
well, let me give
Hang on just a minute, I wanna hear from Paul, and then,
Hi, can you hear me?
yep, you're good, go ahead.
So I was just, one of the things to Mike, Mr. Weisenflu's thing is, I think this process, the way I understood this, was convening this budget committee this way, which is the first time that something like this has been done, and inviting the leaders was to me was a very progressive thing to do. I think the mistake is that we thought I think you think we were gonna have a solution that was gonna be decided in this room, and then we were gonna move forward, when in fact the real job here is to find options, at least in my opinion, was to find options, identify ways of solving the problems, and start working towards solving the problems down the road. There's also, and the reason why I think that I'm also asking for a financial advisor, so when I take office in 3 months, is we don't have good numbers. No one believes the numbers. Some people think we're falling off a cliff, which those of us that have worked for this company for 24 years have heard that every year, at least every bargaining year, and then it never happens. Are we in trouble? Yes, and that's why we did this. But I think we're going to make a decision here. I certainly hope there's not going to be any long-term decisions, and maybe before I get to voice my opinion as a commissioner in 3 months. I helped identify the solution to the $300,000 one by using the unspent wages. And I think I wasn't in the beginning of the meeting, but getting really nervous about the projection of the timber is a little bit immature, I think, at this point too, or premature. So I just want to say that the work you guys have been doing is great. The work that's been done in these, but I certainly would like to have someone else look at the numbers to see exactly how bad we are, from an outside party that's not been doing like that. We've all been doing this, and if you do the thing the same way, we've been saying we've been falling off a cliff. We haven't fallen off a cliff. So let's get someone else's eyeballs. Just having Mike Gleason on board to point out certain inefficiencies and ways to do things better has been very helpful for us to be able to break this culture, this systemic roller coaster ride every year we've been on since I've been here since 2001. So I just want to say the work we're doing here is very important. I personally believe it's time to sundown this group while we gather more intel and then reconvene and figure out, we narrowed it down to these, and and the commissioners, whoever they are at the time, are gonna have to make these decisions. But I think, I feel like it's being rushed now that we're trying to find it. I understand the urgency question, but the urgency for this next period of time, these next 3 months, isn't there. The things that we want to implement, I mean, I know that the easiest solution is cutting positions. As you can tell, you're finding resistance from our end, and definitely from my end. And we do have a lot of things coming up. I do agree with the PUD thing. I think that the TLT raising, we don't know exactly what those are going to do, and we need those numbers as well. And that's something that I think we can be working on in the next 3 months. And I said more than I wanted to. I just wanted to throw that out there. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Okay, now Mike, go ahead.
I understand your frustration and hear it. It's clear to me that this group wants to move fast on things like the issue of the utility fee. Looks very opportunistic. Has $1 million+ attached to it. Go a long ways to solving some problems. To get to there from here, you don't have the horsepower in this organization to do that work. You don't. We're all sitting around here just kind of shooting the breeze. We don't know what the numbers are. We don't know how to allocate the resource. We're gonna start a conversation in the community and we don't know jack. And if we go to the board and say, hey, invent this, you're gonna get a lawsuit within 10 minutes and you better be ready for it. That is what the financial reporter will do. So if the board tells them that's first, that's number one, get that answer to us as soon as you can, that is how you get that thing in place. Turning around to the staff and saying, hey, let's talk about this some more. You go off and do this and you go off and do that, is the way it gets stalled. So I feel very strongly, I mean, if you guys turned to me and said, I've done these several times, say, Mike, do this. I just say, I can't, I don't know how to do it. I don't have the connections to do it. You gotta get somebody in here, you know, it's like, you're a hospital, you do a lot of things, but you don't do open heart surgery. And so you don't sit around the table and say, okay, I know how to do arteries, hey, let me do this. You gotta go get an open heart surgeon to tell you, this is where you put your knife.
Well, I don't have a problem with that, but I guess I kind of agree with Paul, Commissioner like Fournier, that maybe this group is not needed right now until you get that information. And I don't have a problem with getting more information. It's just I'm frustrated because I don't think right now this group, for whatever reason, has the wherewithal to make that decision, and maybe until we get this information. My only point was the further down the road it goes, the harder it is to make the decision. So if this can be done, it can be done quickly. Maybe we wait for that till this group meets again, because it just seems like we're just talking in circles now, and nobody wants to make a decision. Nobody can make a decision, whatever the answer is, until we get this additional information. I just want to emphasize that there's urgency to this, and you know, it's not a year from now, it's not 6 months from now, it's like really soon.
Yeah, I would add to that. I thank you for that perspective. I would agree with that. The only thing I would add is, what's the due date? When are we hiring the company? When are their deliverables? And when are we taking action?
Right.
Like, set those dates in stone. I think part of the frustration that you're starting to hear is, like, we feel this pressure, everybody in this room feels the pressure to take some action. We, I think, recognize that we don't have the bandwidth to understand everything that we need to do. So when can we expect for there to be something tangible?
Something actionable.
I think something actually, I agree with you 100%. And Doug laid it on me heavy the other day. He says, Mike, we can't be waiting for this stuff. I said, I think, you know, this is November. I think by the middle of December, we can get you the first report. Now, I don't wanna tell you that you're gonna get the plan, cause you're not.
You said December, and when you and I talked, we're talking, we'd have a deliverable in draft form by November.
You're right, I'm sorry, I'm in the wrong month.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's October.
and
I lost
one
my-
month is
Yeah,
makes a big difference.
okay, yeah.
That's exactly what we're talking
What,
about.
you want precision out of me too, for crying out? No, you're right, I made a mistake. A month, because you gotta, first off, you gotta decide if this firm or any other firm is the one you want. I can make recommendations, but it's not my decision. And then secondly, we gotta get the scope of work. I've talked to several firms already about scope of work and time. And so, I think within a month, you will be much further down the road. I don't wanna jump ahead and say that they can deliver a rate case by that month. But, yeah, time's a waster, there's no question. You're eating seed corn, we gotta get it done.
We need to move with the same speed that we created central services.
I
Yes,
agree.
absolutely.
Yeah, there you go.
Here, here.
So before Mike and I had this conversation, and it was only a week or more ago, not very long. My plan actually was to go through this again today and do some of the other things we did, and then we had this little incident come up today that we're another $250,000 off. But my plan was to go through and resort these or revalidate them in some fashion and say, okay, we've got 9 things we're gonna do right now, and 3 of you are gonna work on this one, and the 3 of you are gonna do that. Now, the truth of the matter is, 2 or 3 the board and Rachel, we could probably do all this, but I don't think that's very good management. You guys have gotta have ownership in this or we're gonna fail. And that's just my personal belief, and I've gone through a few of these over the years as well. Not quite this drastic, but if you don't have buy-in and a comfort level that you're part of the solution, it ain't gonna work. Or you're gonna throw up obstacles whether you think you are or not, and that's a fact. And I would hang in my hat on that. Don't have a hat today, but I would. So, when Mike and I started the conversation, I thought, that might be a better approach. We'd have another set of practiced eyes, of experienced eyes, look at it. And I think he suggested, we don't have the time or talent or experience. Maybe we do collectively, but probably not individually. And with time being a good part of it, to analyze this is, 40 hours or whatever it takes of people who've done it. And it's like anything else. If you ask a 3-year-old to change a flat tire, it's gonna take a lot longer than if you asked a mechanic. And I think that's kind of where we are, we're not 3-year-olds, but you know what I'm saying is get somebody who does this for a living and has done it more than once and has said, well, you're just like they were over in Caldwell, Idaho, here's what we did. So that's why when Mike and I talked, I thought, well, this is not a bad way forward, because we're at a bit of a decision point here. We've sorted and we've resorted and we've categorized and we've done all that. We've done a lot of the heavy lifting, and we've got some things that are really, really difficult because of unions and everything else. We've got others that could probably start tomorrow. But government is process oriented, and that's a fact. And so the process, and what we did, like we said with central services, we moved at lightning speed. I've never seen, in 40 years of doing this stuff, I've never seen government move that quickly. They just don't. They study on it, or they have a report, or they have a task force, or they have a consultant, or they do something, and 6 months later they say, well, let's see what we can do. Well, this thing here, we put central services together in 60 days. I mean, there may have been some prior thought. And this thing here, what I would like for Mike to do is bring this firm, go talk to them, and maybe several of us should engage with them as well as we go forward and embellish the details, and then tell them your deadline is to come to this meeting a month from today and sit here at this table and say, okay, you got 62 items and we're gonna talk about 13 of them that are real. And see what happens, something like that. Am I saying what I think is, am I on?
No, I think you're on board. Absolutely true. We got to move with pace. And the fastest way I know how to get there is to get some experts in here who do this for a living that can tell you, okay, step 1, step 2, step 3, and here's the math. Because they've done it before. And I've done utility rates before. we did our own electrical stuff, so I'm pretty familiar with that. And it's not something I wanna do off the top of my head, but I do know people that know exactly what to do with it.
So what do you think then, should we give direction to Mike, then bring these people in? Now procedurally, this contract is gonna be $15,000 or some number. So
I think we'll start, I mean, I don't know, I told people, you know, we're not fat and you better sharpen your pencil, that's all I said.
Well, and you get what you pay for, so let me ask Rachel then, from a contracting perspective, how quickly can we go pick out a firm or take the firm he recommends and enter into an agreement? How quickly can we do that?
Depends on how much. If it's under 25,000, I could sign it tomorrow if we have the scope of work. If it's over 25,000, which I don't think it's going to be, then the earliest we could approve it is on your board agenda next Wednesday.
And that's what I'd like to happen, because I think you're quite right. If we're talking about this at Christmas time, then we got a problem. Yes, all right, who's on now? Somebody?
Chris has got his hand up.
So I expressed frustration. I support this idea. I support the short-term fuse. Sky is falling. It might have been that way, but the treasurer's going with the best information that they have, which is the information from the ODF. That's the best information. The same thing would be true with any other funding source. This component here provides a plan. So should the sky fall, and actually do, we've got step one, let's implement this action. Step two, let's implement this action. It's easy, again, from the military, if you have a plan, it's easy to adjust from it. But if you have no plan, you can't adjust, you're making stuff up, which is never a good thing. But with that said, I do think we need to put some hard deadlines on these things. And not just hard deadlines for the reports from the consultants, but hard deadlines from the commissioners to say, yes, we're gonna get this date, and by this date, we need to start putting in signing some board orders. Because that clock is ticking, and what we've been doing since before I got here, back with Deb, is we've been eating into the seed corn for a long time, which means that the revenue is not keeping up. And we just keep kicking the can down, and that's not good. I really do like the process of, let's get that comprehensive review with, a plan step. But then it's also, what can we do now in conjunction with that, so we see some forward motion?
So does anybody think that's a bad idea, or do you have a better way forward?
So maybe a compromise is, like Rachel said, we take action on the low hanging fruit. So maybe the rank ones we take action on, and then whatever's ranked 2 through 4 we push off to the consultants. I'm a business guy, government guy, engineer. They're gonna want to move slower, but you look at the people that make the most money, and it's usually business guys and entrepreneurs, and they're more risk takers. So that's my 2 cents.
Is there anything to prevent us from taking action on the PUD franchise thing? Do we need to wait?
Yeah, you don't have any, you don't even have a real clear idea if you have the legal authority at this point. You've got some off the cuff discussions. You're talking about the rate, yeah. And when you talk to the PUC about this, you wanna start with a factual discussion. You don't wanna start with a, hey, we're thinking about it. So I think you might be able to get to the point, and once again, you put that probability into your budget and up against your seed corn and say, okay, we got a 90% chance of putting this together by June or whatever the date is. Therefore, we're projecting X, Y, Z. We don't have to do this. But I strongly recommend that you don't proceed ad hoc. You must have a foundation analysis. Like, it's not a trivial thing. It is, I think, quite essential. I also am surprised that it isn't here already. But it's a significant amount of money if done correctly. And, you know, there is this legal question. I mean, you may have the authority to do it, but it may not have been litigated yet, and et cetera, et cetera.
I just think if you're gonna go to a consultant asking them to rank and build a thing, it feels to me like it's a mistake then to start doing some stuff without getting their input, because that could impact what they have to say. And I think also the idea of doing like the franchise tax thing where people's utility rates are gonna increase right before you asking them for going after the bond might not be great timing.
Well, it wouldn't, if you're talking about the radio bond, this wouldn't come close to that, but it could certainly be parallel to the short-term rental.
I just think, and I hope the consultants factor these kind of things in, is the timing of these things, because I said earlier, you know, after a while, when you go to the public and tell them we're raising fees and raising taxes and we're asking for money, they're just gonna say no, no matter what. So I hope the timing of when these things come into play would also be part of their
Absolutely. The financial plan in and of itself isn't just a set of, and frankly, the first piece of this, I don't think is the financial plan. What we're gonna get, I think, is your low-hanging fruit answer, is what we're gonna, depending on the scope of work. What you wanna be able to do when you get past that particular low-hanging fruit is that there's always an implementation time. So then you have to have your forecasting model tell you whether you've achieved it or not. And that, you know, just because you didn't do it yesterday doesn't mean that if you do it 6 months from now, you can't take care of it in year 5 and 6. So that's what the seed corn is, to buy time. And we just gotta have enough seed corn to buy enough time, and that's what PACE is all about.
So what if we did this, just as a way forward? What if we get like 4 or 5 of us in this room, meet with one of these firms? I'm not sure we even wanna go through and talk to all 2 or 3 of them, or maybe we could do that. You know, we could take an afternoon and talk to each one remotely or in person, an hour or hour and a half max each one. And then pick out one and then have them submit a contract over to Rachel and put it together with our regular contracting process and sign a contract for $18,500 or whatever it is.
Let me recommend a faster way, that we ask scope of work questions, that they present a scope of work, and that is reviewed.
More than one, from more than one.
Yeah, as many as, you know, but we want a scope of work at a time, so that you're working against something. 5 or 6 people talking about scope of work is.
Well, that's not what I meant. I meant just in terms of visiting with the people. We would already know what we're gonna do. You're right, you need a scope of work.
Yeah,
first.
and visiting we will do, but keeping pace, I want them, the first thing I want them to say is, yeah, here's what will get done by October. And that scope of work question, and they need to bring that back to you and say, yes, we can, or no, we can't. Because there's no reason to have them if we can't get them to make the pace.
Do we need, hang on, Ken, do we need to talk to 2 or 3? Or can we just pick one based on somewhat on your recommendation? How do you think? In other words, trying to make sure we get a deliverable product by the middle of November that is usable, not something that they slap together, cut and paste.
And scope of work is, I believe you can sole source be below 25,000. I'm not exactly sure if that's true. Just because you're sole sourcing, you know, you wanna buy that firm, doesn't mean that you haven't analyzed other scopes of work. But sole source is much faster than RFQ. That is, what asks people, hey, this is what we're thinking about.
I understand that. I think we do that. So if we don't want this to slide off into next year or oblivion, it needs to go quickly, and so let's say we did pick out one firm and then prepare a contract and they get on it immediately. What do you think, Rachel? That's kind of your area of picking out these kinds of people.
What's your question exactly?
If we just said, based on Mike's recommendation, there's 3 of them, maybe you look at their resumes or something and say, okay, they appear to have the time and the qualifications and so on, and you invite them out, develop a scope of work, prepare a contract, sign it, and all that takes a matter of days.
We can do a direct appoint,
Yeah.
so we can.
That's what I mean, but I mean, how much data do you need from these people before we did that? Do we want to rely entirely on him, or have some mini process, I'll call it, to get to the person or the group we want?
So Doug, it seems like this would be a really great thing to assign Rachel to create this process and to get this done. That doing this as a group maybe is not the best practice for us in this to get it done in a reasonable time. Because we trust Rachel to source things for us regularly, and to have her work with Mike to identify 3 consultants, get scope of work, look at cost, and then bring us a recommendation. Feels like it would be a really good idea. And then if we want to discuss it at a board briefing, we can let this group know so they can all listen in if they would like to be a part of the process. But I think Rachel's our expert in this area. It would make sense to task her with bringing that home, and certainly with Mike's support since he has the contacts.
I know she's got extra time. Well, I would agree with that too, Commissioner, because I don't want to get hung up on process. This is not a 6-month, this is a 30-day engagement, at least initially. And we could always ask for more. We could say, well, we need an addendum and we need you to look into this one a little further and, take a couple more weeks or whatever. But it seems to me, because of what was said earlier, we've been talking about this now since I think July. We haven't decided one single thing, not one, except the 1, 2, 3, 4. That's all we've done. We've identified a problem and a sort of a way forward, but we haven't made any decisions to how we're gonna bail ourselves out. I thought until I heard from these people today, I had a decision for this year.
Well, Doug, I think the decision we made for this year is one that can still stand
Yeah.
as a starting point.
Mhm.
So I do
Yes.
think we've made a decision. I
Yeah.
think we've acknowledged and accepted that one of the pieces that we're doing to refine our budget is to look more closely at actual hire. And I would suggest that even without people intentionally slowing their hiring, now that I'm sitting in HR as that interim, that where we've said 3 months for all of these positions, some will take longer.
Sure.
So I think there's actually some more savings in there, so I think we can refine that over the next month if we want to, look at that in conjunction with the report that we're talking about with the financial plan. So I think that we have made a decision, and there's more to make, but I think we have made one, and I think that the sharing of knowledge that has occurred in this group, the opportunity for everyone as leaders to really begin to understand what we're looking at, why we're looking at what we're looking at, to be able to bring in their ideas and their thoughts, the value to what these meetings have brought to this process is huge. Yeah, we have some hard decisions ahead of us without a doubt. And at some point, we are gonna have to make those, and we need to be prepared for that. But I think I would love to celebrate what we've achieved in these meetings in terms of just the coming together, the ideas that are on the table. Get excited about getting a consultant on board ASAP. We got Rachel who knows how to do that. Let's do that in the next month. Let's see what they feel about the work we've done, what other suggestions they have for us. But yeah, we're gonna have to make decisions. We can't wait indefinitely. But I guess I would just recharacterize a little what we've done here.
I think you're right.
It's good. It's
That's
good work done.
well said, because we actually, look back, we really have made a decision, which was no decision today, but more data coming, and it'll evolve into something that will take care of this year. And I would agree. I don't think this year is, even with the news we got today, is a fatal problem at all. It's going to evolve, and we probably have it just by managing the hires and the cash flow of when people go onto various systems, and when PERS kicks in as well. That will there's some money that'll stay in the organization then. So the bigger problem then is the longer term and all these issues we've got and sorting them out. So maybe we do exactly that. Is ask Rachel then to figure out a way forward and keep it moving. Can you do that, Rachel?
I can try to do anything, but if I could summarize where I think we are, because I'm a little lost. So we've been working on trying to get a consultant on board. That's been in the works for a while for the big plan. That's its own track. Meanwhile, we're gonna give the consultant the whole list to try to do something in the interim with the goal of the November meeting. I don't wanna promise that, but that's certainly a goal, cause I don't know what their capacity is. We are going to try to, so the commissioners have asked the leadership team to try to delay filling positions. So if there's nothing that's currently on the street, if there's anything that can wait a little bit longer, especially just the recruitment, because it takes a while to get people on board after January. That's what everybody's supposed to be working on, and that directive just comes out of here. I think everybody from leadership is here. And then we are still proceeding with savings that we know we already have here. Is this coming before the budget committee in November? Or are
I
we
think
just
there's
waiting on
refinements
this?
that can be done on that, and I don't know that we wanna place it in front of the budget committee yet, but that's a good question. And I guess I look at Sean because it's a supplemental budget, and
So Rachel's coming up with more funds that she wants created, so there will already be a supplemental budget.
What
It's
was that?
new funds, yeah, the grant funds that are coming through.
it's my fault we
Oh, the
got
pass-through
another grant.
grants, yeah.
So there will be
Sorry.
one. Are these changes gonna be more than 10%? Probably not, depending on
Of the overall general
of the overall general fund
I don't
budget.
think so,
It would
no.
not need to. I think for clarity, transparency, if I have to bring a supplemental budget before the committee members, I might as well anyway.
Is it something that to make these changes, could that wait till December?
Yeah.
Cause there might be more known than.
Yeah.
So after the middle of November, we will know considerably more if all this comes to pass and we can put the screws to them to stay on it and get it done. We would know more, and so maybe we could adjust our November meeting, move it out and give them an extra week or something like that. So then I could see having at least a draft report, maybe not final, but a draft report from this firm then that Rachel will work with. And then we separately would be pushing off this year's dilemma, and Hannah will know more as that evolves too. So November, we could tie up some loose ends and maybe take some actions in December.
I think that makes sense. I think a target for some action in December based on the knowledge that we have, which will hopefully be updated projections from the Department of Forestry, updated estimates through that point in time with who we've hired, as well as a draft information coming back, at least from financial planner, to say these are the things that you're on the right track, go this direction. But that we do target December for decision, to your point, Michael, that at that point, we say knowing what we know today, and the decision might be do nothing, or the decision might be do something, and what that would be, but it would be a decision point where it's a conscious and intentional decision point of do something or stay the course. Does that make sense?
I think so. Does anybody think that's a bad way forward? We're not exactly kicking the can down the road because we're gonna do 2 or 3 things in the interim, but we're lacking now 2 or 3 pieces of key information, including another set of eyes on our longer term dilemma. So what does the budget committee think? You guys have been kind of quiet here, except for Michael. He's speaking up here.
Sorry.
He's one of the smarter
dude.
ones, Doug. What really stands out to me is that getting a consultant at this juncture to fast forward information and data that we need, data is key. It makes a lot of sense to me personally because deciding there's a central service. To me, the org chart is key to how you're gonna finance and what the priorities are gonna be. And since that now is a known, that's now an org chart that provides information for what savings can come from. So I think that's a perfectly logical next step, is to fast forward, getting the data the best way you can. It's sort of like me doing the RIF myself or hiring it out. Okay, now comes a point in time you have to cut your losses, get the data from a reliable source and move on. But to me, the central service decision is a very key, big thing. I guess from my perspective, the way I've always looked at org charts, so. I think we're on the right road. It took us 3 hours to get here.
Ken?
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I like the idea of outsourcing to a consultancy. I'd put firm deadlines on and maybe try to tie that into the contract. If we don't have deliverables by X date, there's a $18,500 penalty that goes with that.
Yeah.
411,000.
Yeah, exactly. I like the way you think.
Paid directly to.
Do I hear
Send us your check.
Okay, so I think, we're almost out of time. I think we have a way forward, and it seems to me that, you know, we've thought for a while here, we're just churning our wheels, but I don't think so. I think we know what the dilemma is now, and it's an evolving dilemma. We'll know more month by month by month, and we can assume the worst and plan for the worst, and then hope for a middle ground or something like that. But there's some things we can do, and I think they relate to just expanding what I thought we were gonna do in the first place, which is pause some of the hiring and process and take advantage of money that stays inside until it has to be going to the payroll. So I think we can solve this year, and then next year, which is much bigger number, we've done our ranking and we've got a really comprehensive list, but we probably omitted something. But we're gonna have another set of eyes or two or three look at it, and then they will say, okay, you guys, you're right on track or not so much, or do this, or did you think about that, or, you know, we'll hear from them and we're gonna press them for time to show up in this room a month from today and maybe send out a day or two in advance a draft copy, something like that, and then they can come in and visit with us and we'll let it evolve from there. So does that sound reasonable?
So we're keeping the 13th date, November?
I think so. Is there any, you know, the closer you get to the holidays, people, why, what did Cassandra, what's
I
wrong
won't
with
be
you?
here, I'll be right down there taking a lot of payments.
Well, that's right, that's tax day, that's right,
Well, the 15th is
15th.
tax day, but the 13th and the 14th are our busiest days historically.
So the 13th is a Wednesday, is that right? Well,
It's
So
okay.
Doug, maybe hold that date and then we can determine as it gets closer if we
Yeah.
have enough useful information to meet. But it's so hard to get people together. If that date's on everyone's calendar, maybe hold it with
Yeah.
everybody knowing that you might get a gift shortly before that gives you back the gift of time because we're not quite ready. Does that sound
let's do
reasonable?
that, let's keep the schedule that we did through the end of the year. And as we get closer, and it'll depend in part on this firm, if they say, yeah, we can make that, or no, we need another week because so-and-so had to go out of town or something, you never know. So let's give ourselves that latitude, but let's say with certainty, we want some decisions before us, before Thanksgiving. Is that a fair goal? If we have to slide a few days, we will, and of course, we have these stupid things that we can use if we're somewhere else, but
Yeah, I don't know about before Thanksgiving, Doug, cause then you've got the conference that week before Thanksgiving. So I
Yeah.
would suggest that in December, we
well,
want some
yeah,
decisions.
that's right,
So I
okay,
think that if we, cause we have a December date held as well, is that correct?
yes, I believe
So
so.
maybe holding that December date with the goal of, hopefully we'll have information to distribute before that, discuss during that, decisions to follow that, so that might be a
Yeah, I forgot about the AOC is that week, that all of us or some of us will be gone, so let's do everything we can to have a conversation with the right kind of information at our November meeting. And we'll look to Mike to put the screws to this company that Rachel hires and just say, hey, you know, this is not the biggest term paper in the world, but it's got some urgency to it. Okay, so are we all good? And we've laid more stuff on Rachel and here we go again. But she'll get it done, I think. All right, anybody have any more questions or anything that we need to talk about? I think we all know what the issue is and you know, we all know that for certain, a year from now, Tillamook County will still be here and we'll be doing stuff. But in the meantime, we got a rocky road ahead of us, so try and fix it.
I just wanna say that I might have said some of the things you were talking about that you've heard over the years. And I really appreciate this group because I think what's important as a leadership team is we continue these hard conversations. And we need a space to have them, you know?
And it's Mike's fault.
Yeah. Well, it's what we do with our teams, you know, we sit down and we have those hard conversations and we move forward, you know? stronger for it.
Yep.
And that's what I'm excited about this group for.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, well, thank you all for coming and see you down the road.
I've got a.
Yeah.
So we just.
Yeah.